I've had this "vehicle coolant is low" warning on my dash for a few months, and haven't really had time to deal with it because on electric cars, simply refilling your leaky coolant reservoir without finding where the coolant is going is not a great idea. In this video, I'll show you how I found my leak and how I fixed it. The repair is reasonably simple, but I made it way more difficult than it needed to be. I'll show you how to avoid my mistakes and the shortcuts not to take. So why not just refill the coolant reservoir? Why is this particularly bad in an EV? In EVs, coolant flows through both the battery and the drive unit, and a leak into either of these isn't actually the danger of overheating. The car will protect itself from that. The problem is that it's doing invisible cumulative damage in the form of corrosion to the inverter, batteries, or motor. This will eventually lead to their failure and a very expensive repair. Adding more coolant just silences the warning, and more coolant ends up going into the part. On some Tesla models, there are service procedures for detecting these leaks. So rather than just refilling the reservoir, make sure the leak gets found. This is time and money well spent. Anyway, back to me ignoring my own coolant leak. A few weeks ago, my ex got to the point where it threw this DIS W126 code and reduced my power. Now, somehow this code is not in Tesla's owner's manual, but it looks like this code can be due to any number of things. One in particular, according to various fora, is inadequate cooling to the battery or drive unit due to low coolant or air in the coolant system. So my coolant had probably now leaked to the point where I had air in the system. There are some common leaks that develop in these Teslas, in particular in the three-way and four-way valves. And I could have just looked for those, but I really wanted to know whether I was also leaking into the battery or motor, so I brought it into the service center. Here's where things get a little weird. My service rep told me when I dropped it off that for the 2012 to 2020 Model X and S, and I confirmed this in the service manual, that there is actually no official procedure to check for a coolant leak into the battery or the small drive units. The best they could do is to find an external leak in the coolant lines, pumps, or in one of the valves. He said that literally, until the battery or drive unit fails, they'll only know that it was due to a coolant leak when they replace it and autopsy the old part. This seems crazy to me, but it is 100% consistent with what I have encountered at service centers. In fact, one very common leak in this era S and X is a leak into the large drive unit. And there's a whole third-party ecosystem around diagnosing the LDU leak and installing a coolant bypass. My Tesla is a non-performance dual motor, which means it has a small drive unit and isn't prone to this particular leak. So I had to look elsewhere. Anyway, since the car was already there, I had them keep it to see what they could diagnose. And they did discover that the three-way valve was leaking. They quoted a repair for the leaking three-way valve at 1.08 hours of labor, and a preventative replacement of the four-way valve at 1.14 hours of labor, for a total of $600 in labor and $200 in parts. 1 hour for replacing the three-way valve or four-way valve is actually very quick. That's a good deal. But notably, the three-way valve and four-way valve are literally connected to each other, and when replaced together should take no more time than replacing just the four-way valve itself. If Tesla's standard practice is to replace these together if one of them is leaking, they should create a correction code for the replacement of the three-way and four-way valves together. Also, note the double charge for the coolant part for the refill. This is a side effect of these being treated as two separate repairs. That said, having now done this myself, I would have happily paid the $600 in labor to have them do it. Instead, full of optimism, I asked them to just supply the parts, which they happily did at the cost of $130. Both new valves were on the passenger seat when I picked it up from the service center. Let's take a moment to understand what the three-way and four-way valves are doing. They're routing coolant around your car, selectively cooling, heating, or exchanging heat with things that need to be warmer or cooler than they currently are. A shout out here to EVCreate, who made these diagrams. Link in the description. You may have noticed in my invoice that the three-way valve is also called the radiator bypass valve. You can see here that it does exactly that. It either routes coolant through the radiator to exchange heat there, or it bypasses the radiator entirely. This is basically the electromechanical equivalent of the bimetal thermostat in ICE cars. The four-way valve is a little more complicated. It is called the series parallel valve, and it decides to route coolant either in one big serial loop, where the batteries and drive units get the same coolant, or it can split the coolant flow into two parallel loops, where the batteries get heated or cooled in one loop, and the drive unit gets cooled by a separate loop in parallel. You can imagine this would be useful, for example, if the batteries need to be heated while the drive unit needs to be cooled. Later Teslas have eliminated the 3-way and 4-way valves for an octo valve, which combines all of these coolant routing valves into a single part. From videos I've seen, it looks like this is a more robust part than the 3 and 4-way valves, so a nice improvement. These diagrams EVCreate made are super useful, but if we look at the actual physical layout in a Model X, you'll notice that the 3-way valve here and the 4-way valve here are connected with this little piece of hose. So this diagram where they are separate actually probably looks more like this physically in the Model X. Alright, now that we understand what we're fixing, let's get into it. The 3-way valve and the 4-way valves are right beside each other behind the frunk tub. First, take the gasket off the top, unclip these two little lights that light up the frunk when it's open, and remove the liner. The plastic tub is held down with a number of 10mm bolts, all of which need to be removed. I like to collect them in a Ziploc bag so I don't lose any. Now that the bolts are removed, the tub can come out. You just need to move these little shrouds out of the way. They just kind of clip on, and then pull it out. So at this point you've exposed the HEPA filter, which it might be a good time to replace. Remove the HEPA filter and shroud, and now you've exposed everything needed to diagnose this leak. First, take a look at the coolant reservoir. Probably the coolant is low, but if not, maybe you don't actually have a leak and just need to run an air purge. Just skip to that chapter in the video. The 3-way and 4-way valves are back here under this bar and connect to each other. You can't really see the bottom of them for inspection, so if you can get your hand back there, put on a pair of gloves and run your hand under them. If you find some wetness, you found the leak. Otherwise, you can also see them from under the car if you remove one of the plastic panels. Now we need to remove the old leaking valves, but wait a sec, here's where I made my first big mistake. This is the 12-volt battery. In the service manual, the next step is to disconnect it and remove it and its mounting cage. I thought that was probably some blanket safety thing and too much of a pain to bother with. Well, when my coolant pumps turned on halfway through the repair and sprayed a few liters of coolant on everything, I wasn't feeling too smart. On top of that, the battery is really in the way here, and once you start dealing with hose clamps, you'll wish it was gone. Alright, so after removing the 12-volt battery, we remove the plastic support bar that runs across here. Remove the 2 bolts connecting it to the chassis, then the 2 bolts that connect it to the radiator. Now you'll need to remove 2 bolts holding the battery cage. Then, there are a number of zip ties that need to be clipped. Finally, if you look down closely in here, you'll see there are 2 T30 bolts on each valve that attaches them to the support bar. Remove those. Here's an example of how I removed 2 of them. It's tight, but I was able to get an Allen key down there and just work at it. All 4 bolts came off this way. Now that everything is unbolted from it, the plastic bar should be free, and, with some Tetris skills, I was able to remove it. Alright. Now we're about to get into the meat of the repair, when we start taking hoses off the valves. Here's the second pitfall. All the hoses are attached to the valves with spring hose clamps. These spring clamps are designed to be used with a special tool that effectively locks them open. It's easily available, but I didn't have it, and I was neck deep at this point. It easily took me 2 to 3 hours to remove the hose clamps using pliers and vice grips. I even had to just cut the ends off 2 of the hoses and remove the clamps after I got the valves out. So bad. So yeah, mistake 1, absolutely disconnect and remove the battery so that the coolant pumps don't turn on while you're doing this repair, and so that you can access the valves and hose clamps. Mistake 2, absolutely spend the extra few dollars to get the flexible hose clamp tool before starting this. The hose clamps are so difficult to grab with pliers or vice grips. I was tempted to replace them with normal hose clamps, but after a lot of research, I'm convinced that these spring clamps are superior because they can be set at the right spring rate for the application and don't have the problem of backing off. By the way, if you're finding my videos useful, please like and subscribe. So this is the 3-way valve and this is the 4-way valve. So the 3-way valve has 3 lines that come into it, 1, 2, 3. The 4-way valve has 1, 2, 3, and then there's one in the back, 4. So a total of 7 lines. But we only need to clamp 5 of them because 2 of them go between each other and we're going to be removing these at the same time. So we'll clamp 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the one in the back here. So you can get these clamps online. They should be plastic so that they don't cut the lines. I got these ones on Amazon. Once you clamp a line, you just pull the slider into place to hold the clamp closed. Now the part I had so much trouble with. If you got the clip tool I described earlier, I think this should be very easy. As for me, This took a few hours using pliers and vice grips to remove all these hoses. And even then, I couldn't get a few off. I had to actually cut them with a razor blade. Anyway, there, yeah, I got one off, so that's a good start. Yeah, and this is one of the hoses I needed to cut with a razor. It's embarrassing, but there it is. And here's the successful removal of the third hose. This looks easy, but this is after like half an hour of footage that I've cut out. And here's the fourth hose. I got the vice grips onto the clamp and I really thought I could get it off, but after a long time I couldn't, and here I am cutting the fourth hose. And here we're finishing the removal of the last hose, the fifth hose. This one's on the back of the four-way valve at the bottom, and we finally succeed using those vice grips. So now all that's left is to fish these two valves out of here. They both have electrical connections on them, so you can see here trying to get that off. I'll do a close-up of what it looks like. There you go. So yeah, once you get those electrical connections off, you should be able to, especially if you've removed the battery cage like I suggest, pull that set of three-way and four-way valve out of there, and at that point you've turned the corner, and now it's time to put things back together with the new valves. Installing the new valves is basically the reverse of the removal. Connect the new valves together with the short piece of hose and secure the electrical connections. Then place the valves roughly where they will be sitting once reinstalled. The first hose I reconnected was the bottom of the four-way valve, since that will soon be blocked by all the other hoses once they're connected. Other than that, I just put the other hoses on in order of the least accessible first. For each hose, I open up the spring clamp, slide the hose on the valve, and then release the clip. You'll need to do a total of 5, not including the short hose connecting the three-way and four-way valves. Hold the clip open, slide it on, slide the hose onto the valve, release the clip. Don't be fooled into thinking that vice grips will be okay to use. You'll notice I started filming this with lots of sunshine, and now I'm filming at night. I've cut out hours of fumbling. You can also see how much more difficult this is because I hadn't removed the battery cage. Anyway, once the hoses are all reconnected, we can put the support bar back in. There are little loops on the bar for holding zip ties. Put those in and then wriggle the support bar back into its approximate place. After working it in there, I left it disconnected from the chassis until everything else was mounted to it, so I could scoot it around a bit when needed. The first thing to remount to the support bar are the valves themselves. Same idea as the removal. It's tight, but I was able to do it with an Allen wrench. You can tighten these bolts fully. Then, remount the battery cage, but just hand tight. Finally, I bolted the support bar to the chassis and radiator. At this point, you're ready to tighten down the battery cage mount bolts. The last step is to resecure the hoses with the zip ties, if you can remember where you removed them from. And that does it. We're now ready to refill the coolant. Now that everything's back together, we just need to add coolant and then bleed any air that may be in the system. You can find Tesla coolant in local auto parts stores. Here I'm using a Xerox 50/50 pre-diluted blend advertised for Teslas. Fill the reservoir up to the max line because when air comes out of the system, the coolant level will drop. Now make sure the car is in service mode and head to the thermal section with the snowflake. Select Coolant Air Purge and follow the instructions on the screen until the Run button appears. After pressing that, you'll need to jump through some hoops to verify your selection, like holding the brake and turning on the turn signal. Once you complete those, the car unlocks the ability to run the air purge routine. Press the Run Routine button to begin the air purge. You should hear the coolant pumps start, and coolant will be flowing around the system. If you watch the reservoir, you should see evidence of flow. When I watched mine, small bubbles occasionally rose. I had to run the air purge routine 3 times before I didn't see any more bubbles and the coolant level stopped dropping. Over the course of my 3 purges, the coolant level dropped from max to nominal. Then, I closed the routine, topped the coolant off just below max, and put everything back together. This is all just the reverse of the removal, so we will speed right through all of this. So yeah, if you have a low coolant warning, make sure to figure out where the coolant is going. You don't want your EV's battery or drive unit to be filling up with coolant and dying a slow and expensive death. And on some newer Teslas, there are even service procedures for finding leaks in the inverter or battery enclosures. Good luck finding your leak.